The jungle did not welcome them. It breathed, a heavy, humid pulse that clung to the skin and turned every breath into a labor. Elias Thorne checked the compass for the 10th time in an hour, but the needle spun with a frantic, erratic rhythm, useless against the magnetic anomalies of this place. They were deep within the blank space now, a patch of the Amazon that satellite imagery had failed to resolve. No trails existed here. No signals reached them. Just a suffocating emerald ocean of trees that seemed to close ranks behind them with every step they took. The team moved in a tight, rhythmic line, machetes biting into thick vines. But the sound of their progress felt small, swallowed instantly by the vastness. By mid-afternoon, the atmosphere shifted. The vibrant, chaotic symphony of the canopy, the constant chirping and rustling began to thin. Then, it stopped. A sudden, absolute stillness descended, pressing against their eardrums like deep water. Elias stopped, his hand raised to signal a halt. He scanned the dense wall of foliage. Nothing moved, yet the hair on his neck stood rigid. He was no longer looking for a path. He was looking for the source of the gaze that had been fixed on them. They were no longer alone. A rustle in the ferns broke the silence. It did not sound like wind or a falling branch. It was rhythmic, deliberate. From the dense, tangled undergrowth, it emerged. It was small, its body marked by scrapes and caked in dark, dried mud. It stood on the forest floor, motionless, its dark eyes locking onto Elias with a clarity that felt entirely alien. It did not flee. It did not growl. It simply watched, waiting. One of the team members stepped forward, machete lowered, and scoffed at the sight. "Just a wild animal, Elias. Let us keep moving." The man turned back to his GPS, but Elias did not move. He felt a sharp, sudden prickle of intuition that defied his training. The creature turned its head, took 3 precise steps, and stopped. It glanced back over its shoulder, its gaze expectant, almost impatient. It was not a random encounter. It was a summons. Elias felt the weight of the moment. He looked at the blank space on his map, then at the creature. "Oh, this is not normal," he murmured. He took a single, heavy step toward the animal. Behind him, the team hesitated, then fell in behind him, leaving the path to follow the animal deeper into the emerald dark. The deeper they moved, the more the forest seemed to hold its breath. The vibrant, chaotic symphony of the Amazon, the chirping of insects, the rhythmic calls of birds, the rustle of leaves began to thin. Then, it simply ceased. An eerie, absolute hush descended, thick and heavy, as if the jungle itself were watching them pass. Elias checked his wrist. The GPS screen, once a beacon of reliability, flickered with garbled, nonsensical data. He tapped the glass, but the display remained frozen. No map could explain their location. The coordinates were gone. He looked back at the team. They were no longer talking. The bravado of the morning had evaporated, replaced by a quiet, mounting tension. Every footfall on the damp earth sounded like a thunderclap. The creature moved ahead, a silent shadow against the emerald gloom. It paused, glancing back to ensure they were still trailing, its eyes reflecting nothing of the world they had left behind. Elias pushed a heavy vine aside, his hand trembling slightly. Elias shoved aside a thick, hanging curtain of vines and stopped dead. The air shifted, losing its stagnant humidity and cooling instantly. Above them, the dense canopy fractured, letting in a shaft of harsh, unfiltered sunlight that illuminated a wall of gray stone. It was not a rock formation. The edges were too sharp, the geometry too precise to be a trick of nature. He reached out, pressing his palm against the surface. It was cold, solid, and impossibly ancient. Thick, gnarled roots, as heavy as pythons, coiled over the masonry, binding the stone to the earth. Elias stepped back, his eyes tracing the line of the wall. It did not end. It curved away into the shadows, connecting to a series of crumbling, grand structures. The team gathered behind him, their breath hitching in the sudden, open space. No one spoke. The silence was now filled with the weight of 1,000 years. They had been searching for a blank space on a map, but they had found a ghost. Pathways, plazas, and foundations stretched out before them. The scale of the ruins was staggering. It was a place that existed outside of modern history, untouched and utterly forgotten, waiting in the dark for someone to finally look up. Elias moved to the nearest wall, his fingers brushing over the rough, weathered stone. He wiped away a layer of moss, revealing a deep, deliberate etching. It was the creature. He stepped to a fallen statue nearby, its face eroded but its form unmistakable. It was the same animal that had led them through the jungle. He walked faster now, scanning the plaza. Every pillar, every ceremonial arch, every crumbling altar featured the same silhouette. The creature was not a stray inhabitant. It was the architect, the idol, the singular focus of this entire lost world. Elias stopped before a massive slab, his heart hammering against his ribs. The carvings were not random. They were a narrative, a history written in stone. He looked back at the path they had just traveled, then at the creature standing a few yards away, watching them with that same unnerving intelligence. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. They had not stumbled upon these ruins by chance. They had been brought here, guided by a purpose they were only beginning to grasp. The jungle was not a wilderness they were mapping. It was a trap, or perhaps a temple, and they were the latest participants in a ritual that had been playing out for centuries. Elias turned, his hand outstretched, ready to demand an explanation from the creature. He needed to know why they were here, what this place demanded of them. But the space where the animal had stood was empty. He blinked, scanning the clearing, his eyes darting from the base of a crumbling pillar to the shadow of a fallen arch. Nothing. No rustle of leaves, no snap of a twig, no soft padding of paws on the stone floor. It had vanished, as if the jungle had simply reclaimed it. Elias ran to the edge of the plaza, his boots skidding on the slick, moss-covered stone. He dropped to his knees, searching the soft earth for prints, but the ground was undisturbed. The rest of the team crowded around him, their voices rising in a frantic, disjointed chorus. "Where did it go?" one shouted, spinning in a circle. Another began tearing at the thick vines hanging from the temple walls, desperate to find a hidden passage. They moved with a sudden, jagged intensity, their composure shattering. Elias stood, his chest heaving, his fingers gripping the edge of his compass until his knuckles turned white. The needle spun aimlessly, a useless piece of metal in a place that defied all logic. They were alone, surrounded by stone eyes that watched from every wall, and the silence of the ruins felt heavier than before. Elias pushed through the main temple archway, his boots crunching on shattered stone. The interior was a tomb of silence, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and rot. He moved toward the center of the chamber, where a massive, raised dais sat beneath a shaft of filtered light. He knelt, pulling his knife to scrape away the thick, calcified moss, covering the stone surface. His blade hit something hard. He worked faster, clearing the debris until the image emerged. It was not a god or a king. It was a group of figures, human in shape, walking in a line. At the front of the procession stood the creature, its posture identical to the way it had stood just hours before. Elias traced the lines of the carving with his thumb. The figures were carrying gear, their heads bowed, following the animal into the heart of the jungle. He looked at his own team, then back at the stone. The detail was precise, down to the way the leading figure held a compass. The shock froze him in place. This was not a record of a past event. It was a blueprint of their own arrival. Elias leaned closer, his breath hitching as he noticed a final detail carved into the base of the slab. Below the procession of figures, a single symbol was etched deep into the stone. It was not a language he recognized. It possessed no recognizable syntax, no familiar geometry. He pulled his notebook from his pack, his hands trembling as he tried to copy the jagged, interlocking lines. Each time he looked back at the stone, the shape seemed to shift, defying his attempts to capture its essence. He held his camera up, the shutter clicking in the hollow chamber. But the digital display showed only a blur where the symbol should have been. The team gathered behind him, their faces pale in the dim light. They stared at the mark, waiting for Elias to offer an explanation, a translation, anything to anchor them to reality. He had none. The symbol remained silent, an impenetrable barrier between their understanding and the truth. A cold realization settled in his chest. They were echoes in a cycle they could neither read nor escape. The return to civilization was a blur of sterile airports and fluorescent lights. Elias sat in his office, the hum of the city outside his window sounding like a distant, dying machine. He opened his field journal. The pages were filled with sketches of the temple, the carvings, and the creature, yet they felt like someone else's work. He tried to explain the discovery to his colleagues, but the words felt heavy and wrong. When he spoke of the temple, they heard only a tall tale of a lost ruin. When he described the creature, they saw only a hallucination. He stopped trying. He spent his nights staring at the final untranslatable symbol he had etched into the back of his notebook. It remained a jagged, mocking shape that refused to resolve into meaning. He found himself walking the city streets, checking his compass, looking for a sign, a rustle, a flicker in the shadows of the concrete. He was back in the world of maps, yet he felt like a ghost. Had they truly discovered anything at all? Or had they simply played their part in a script written in stone long before they were born? He looked at his hands, steady and real, then back at the symbol. The jungle was thousands of miles away, but he could still feel its breath. He closed the journal. The cycle continued, and somewhere, in the deep, emerald dark, the creature was waiting.